Hi, Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, and in this edition of Autism Fitness Concepts, I want to talk about scalability. Scalability is the factor that is going to determine whether a fitness or adapted PE program for the autism population, for any population really, but in particular the autism population, is going to be effective and successful and do what it actually purports to do. Scalability means that we can progress or regress an activity, an exercise, a movement, so that our athlete, our student, the person we're coaching, is able to complete it with as best technical form and perseverance as possible. Now, when an exercise is not scaled properly, we have a couple different things going on. Now, we might have an athlete who is highly motivated to participate, but they're not getting anything out of that particular exercise because it is too progressed for them. And that's where we're going to see movement compensation. That's where we're going to see issues in performance. Again, if they're motivated, they're going to do it, but it may not be with the form and technique that's going to create a healthy movement pattern. We see this a lot with hurdle steps. We see it with medicine ball throws also. So the key here is really being able to know what we're looking at when we're watching an individual move. So all of these compensatory movement patterns and deficits that are common to the autism population, we really have to have those down and understand when they might present themselves. When we're going to see knees and hips internally rotating, when we're going to see forward shoulder posture, when we're going to see other ways of the body compensating in order to complete the task or the movement that we are trying to complete. So a highly compliant or highly motivated athlete is great to have. That's what we're trying to achieve. But we also want to set up the situation so that the movement itself, the exercise itself, makes sense for that particular athlete's current level of ability. And that is where we find the scalability of an activity. Now, we can find that in a single activity when we're talking about our go-to warm-ups. So for example, overhead band walks or walking band pulls, or our crawling patterns and our cone touches and our hurdle steps. And then we can talk about games or activities as a whole. So when we play, or we have our athletes play cone carnage, for example, there still needs to be a scalability from both a physical and a cognitive factor too. When you add in competition, when you add in the abstract concepts of winning and losing and scoring points, then you're adding things to the mix that may make it too complex for one individual to perform adequately, or even a group. Then you're going to have a lot of confusion, and you might have athletes who are stalling and stopping and aren't quite sure what's happening next and what the expectation is for them. So the scalability of an activity, the reason that's going to make for a successful outcome if it's scaled correctly, is because we are directing that activity around the needs and around the current abilities of that particular athlete or the group that we're working with. And whenever we're working with a group, we know that there are going to be different levels of physical, adaptive, and cognitive skill. So as one athlete might be perfectly okay and even thrive in competitive or quasi-competitive situations, another athlete in that group doesn't necessarily get it, or that's not conducive to how they function and thrive in this environment. And the scalability factor is in all three of our essential areas of performance: the physical, the adaptive, and the cognitive. So when we understand what good movement looks like and how an athlete is going to perform with a particular level of exercise, say with an overhead press, for example, if the weight is too high, then the athlete might get it overhead, but are their arms folding forward? Are they cranking and extending with their low back in order to complete the exercise? If that's the case, then the exercise isn't really providing any net benefit from a strength and stability perspective, because they begin to go into compensation. So we're probably going to have to lower the weight there? Are they gripping the sandbell when they're doing that overhead press? Again, if there's nuance to the grip, and if some of the fingers are doing what we call pinky peel and starting to peel off the object, are they completing the activity to the best of their current ability? And are they doing it in a way where it's going to be functionally beneficial for them? So there's a big difference here between prescribing and incorporating and including a particular exercise and knowing how that exercise needs to be done in order for it to benefit that particular athlete. Now, of course, this could be said about any athlete. It could be said about any exercise. So we really have to have our technical expertise down with what this movement is supposed to look like in order to understand what our athlete's current baseline is for performance. With respect to bear crawls, for example, or bear walks, a lot of our athletes can't start with the bear walk with their knees up off the mat because they're going to go into either spinal flexion, they're going to raise their butt up, or they're going to start teeter-tottering and shifting left to right because they can't stabilize the trunk. If this is the case, then just having them do it improperly, having them go through that bear walk over and over again is not going to be beneficial or conducive to them enhancing their motor skills. They might get a little bit of coordination out of it, there might be a little stability, but we want to teach with best practices and best outcomes in mind. So at that point, the scalability is about reducing the level of challenge or regressing that bear walk into a bear crawl. So putting our athlete into quadruped position and having them do just that linear back and forth quadruped crawl to begin with until we can bridge that skill and they are able to perform the bear crawl and then go into the bear walk. That's the scalability, is knowing where we need to start and being able to intelligently progress or regress the exercise to meet the needs of any individual. Now, the beauty of scalability is that this is a wonderful way to consider group work. Rather than have an adapted PE class or a group fitness session for the autism population where we're only teaching towards the highest functioning or the highest performing athlete or the lowest performing athlete, scalability allows us to take an exercise and say, okay, for 2 or 3 or 4 or more athletes in this situation, where is their current ability level and how do we need to progress it or regress it? So with hurdle steps, for example, we can have really low hurdles, we can have 6-inch high hurdles, we can have 12-inch high hurdles for 3 different athletes, and they're all benefiting from that exercise the way that they need to be benefiting from that exercise. And we are also resisting against or preventing against compensatory movement patterns because the exercise is too challenging for one or more of the athletes in that situation. Equally important, if we have an athlete who can already step over 5, 6-inch tall hurdles, why would we have them keep doing that over and over and over when it's time for them to progress and move on to a more challenging variation of that exercise? So it's all a toolbox, and all of the exercises that we use are just those. They are tools to get to a desired end, whether we're talking about strength, stability, motor planning, coordination, and locomotion, all of these different skill sets, strength endurance, all of these different skill sets, we have particular exercises that we use as means to get to those goals. But the most important thing about getting to those goals is knowing what those goals should be. Having exercises, having activities, having movements that are scalable, and knowing what the criteria is for scaling or modifying those exercises is what's going to lead to success in your program with your athletes. And so scalability is the success ingredient for programming. If we're looking at an exercise, we're looking at a physical activity, we have to decide, okay, is there a way we can incorporate this? Even if we're talking about sports, or whether they're individual or team-based, how do we find a way to progress this or regress this so that each athlete in that program is getting what they need to get out of it, and so that it's progressive in nature, so that we have goals that are set and then goals that are achieved. I hope you got something, a takeaway out of this short feature on scalability. I'm Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness. This has been Autism Fitness Concepts, Scalability.